From Cherry Hill Publishing, December Boys, a J. Porter novel. Written by Joe Clifford. Read for you by Timothy McKean. Oh, you December boys got it bad. Songs of losers and dreamers can be such a drag. Birthdays and graduations through a telephone. Another son of a Rolling Stone. Now there's gonna come a time when your little world's coming apart, 'cause this whole world's just dying to break your heart. Jackson, don't you worry. 2 Cow Garage. Chapter 1. I sat in my idling truck outside the abandoned construction site, staring up at the towering specter of Lamentation Mountain. A cold rain fell, assaulting the roof of my ride. The thaw of spring would be here soon, but for now, temperatures hovered near freezing, as one late-season storm rolled in after the next. Gusts picked up and whistled through the ravine. Even though I now lived on the other side of New Hampshire, I couldn't get far enough away. The range's black shadow hung over everything. The rusted sign read, "Property of Lombardi Construction. Trespassers will be prosecuted." Thick chains wrapped around quarry gates to keep out vandals, an unnecessary precaution. Even criminals weren't trekking this far into the cuts to haul 16 tons onto the back of a pickup. Someone would fetch the bobcats and front loaders once the weather turned warmer and hardware could be wrenched free from the frozen earth, retrieved for scrap and sold. Or maybe not. The discarded metal might be worth more as a tax write-off. I reached inside my glove compartment, bypassing Marlboros for a map. Cold rain turned to sleet, which turned to freezing rain, icy pellets beating a steady pattern. Out the cracked windshield, which I hadn't gotten around to fixing since an accident last winter, I gazed across the gravel pit and up the steep, rocky banks of the culvert. One wrong turn, and I'd ended up here. Just my luck. Perfect way to end the day. I popped a piece of Nicorette gum through the foil and unfurled the gas station map to find out where the hell I was. I couldn't read the tiny intersecting street names between the bug-eaten holes and too many folds. I wished I'd remembered my cell. Not that it would have helped. Tower service this far north was spotty, and forget GPS. I knew my wife would be pissed when she couldn't reach me, and my boss wasn't going to be any happier, since my unexpected detour had put me behind schedule. I'd wasted an entire afternoon. I had to sign off on the Olisky file today. The last thing I needed was being reminded of the worst year of my life. I pushed the map from the console, turned off the shoulder, and steered back onto the road. Exiting the property, I passed an empty guard station, little wooden shack buried beneath a mound of snow. I hadn't noticed it on the way in. The shack had a newer, more recent sign affixed. Fresher rivets, shiny metal plate. All very official looking. One word in sleek red writing. Tomasi. I'd gone to school with Louis Tomasi, the only reason the name registered at all. With darkness descending, I was running out of time. The Oliskys lived half an hour south of Plasterville, in Libby Brook, another faceless farming town, tucked down meandering country roads, all of which were named some variation after St. Thomas Place, St. Thomas Route, St. Thomas Way. Temps turned colder, freezing rain bulleted the windshield. I had a brutal time deciphering signs. Out on the western front, landmarks were few and far between, occasional farmhouses cropping up in between a whole lot of nothing. By the time I did, a wintry slice of silver moon peeked over the tops of the tall pines, glinting down the backs of ice-slicked rock. When I stepped from the cab, crisp country air stabbed my lungs. I retrieved my little briefcase that held the Oliski report and my thermos with the coffee that had long run cold. I committed the 2 silos and broken-down plow in an adjacent field to memory, in case I ever had reason to come out this way again. I doubted I ever would. I introduced myself to the skinny teenager who answered the door, explaining who I was, who I worked for, and what I was doing there. He said his name was Brian, and little else. Jittery fella. Tall but lanky, wispy almost. Like one good gust and he'd be carried away on the breeze forever. The kid craned his head past me, running the length of bowed planks on the rickety old porch. I didn't know what he was searching for. Nothing out there in the darkness but an Amish swing that had seen better days, a couple gallons of paint stowed beneath the seat. In the soft porch light, I could see where someone had started sanding the exterior, but hadn't finished the job. "My mother's not home," Brian Oliski said. "You mind if I ask you a few questions about the car accident?" I cinched my winter coat tighter and blew on my hands, a not too subtle hint for an invitation inside. It was witch tit cold out there. When that display didn't elicit the desired response, I stomped my feet for emphasis. "It's my mom's policy." "I know that, Brian, but you were in the car with her." Like I hadn't bothered to read who the policyholder was. The kid was 16 years old. Who knew why he was so twitchy and anxious? He'd probably been jacking it before I showed up. The boy wasn't biting, though, staring back at me through oversized glasses. Damned things bigger than his head. There wasn't much I could do. D'Souza got pissy any time a policyholder complained about rude behavior, reminding me that, above all, insurance is a service industry. But I also knew my boss would crawl up my ass if I'd wasted an entire day tooling around the sticks without closing the book. "My mom isn't here," Brian repeated. "Yeah, I heard you the first time." I flipped open the report, pretending to verify the name and address, which was for the kid's benefit. I knew I had the right house. Wasn't a neighbor in either direction for miles. He'd already told me his goddamn name. I clicked my pen, my money move. The sooner I got the information I needed, the sooner I could get on the road and get home. I hated missing my son's bedtime. Most mornings I was out the door before Aiden woke. If I got in too late, I wouldn't be able to see him at all. Spending more time with my son was half the reason I'd signed up for this stupid job in the first place. "Just you and your mom living here?" Brian shuffled his feet, antsy to be rid of me. I stared into the woodsy, rustic home, one of those old farmhouses that's been in the family for generations. No way the Oliskis could afford it otherwise. I knew the husband was out of the picture, and I'd seen Donna's pay stubs. The interior was stuffed with cheap rocking chairs no one sat in, moth-eaten Afghans no one wears, folksy advice stitched on wall-hung tapestries that no one follows. "Can you come back later?" Brian said. I shut the folder and stowed the pen, hoping to set Brian at ease. I didn't want to play the heavy. Standing there like some authoritative agency, I felt like Rob Turley, this guy I knew in high school who'd become our hometown's sheriff. Before my junkie brother, Chris, died last year, Turley had jailed him plenty over the years. Every time Turley would greet me in his uniform, a hitch in his step and stars on his shoulder, I could see through the act. You go from getting wasted together at reservoir parties to checking off boxes on application forms, deciding someone else's fate. Drop the officious pretense, be a regular guy, which was what I was anyway. "Listen, man," I said, catching Brian's eye. "I just have a few questions on the claim. Straightforward stuff. 5 minutes tops." I thumbed behind me in the dark and cold. This would be a lot easier to do inside. What do you say, be a pal? The boy opened the door and let me in. Inside the mudroom, I wiped my shoes on the mat, removed my Patriots knit cap, and winced a smile. A grandfather clock stood proudly against the oatmeal-colored walls, but the pendulum didn't swing. I began to peel off my winter coat, but stopped short. The drafty farmhouse wasn't much warmer inside. Heating these old homes wasn't cheap. Oil could run a couple grand easy. I checked the roof beams. I'd spent a lot of time inside ancient colonials like this when I was working my old job in estate clearing back in Ashton. Most were built in the 1700s, and the construction business had come a long way since the Revolutionary War. Overhauling an entire heating system could drain your bank account. Best bet was shoring up leaks. You know, I said, you and your mom should insulate this ceiling. I pointed toward the rafters. Wouldn't be too expensive. Build a fake ceiling. Stuff a little fiberglass padding up there. You're bleeding money. Heat rises. So you want to ask me questions about the crash? Right. I dropped my briefcase on a kitchen table littered with shopping flyers and red-letter final notices. I popped the top and pulled my file. What day was the accident? Brian motioned at the chart in my hands. Isn't it in your report? Yes, it is. I just need to hear it from you. Last Monday. He squinted an eye. About 1:30? Your mom picked you up from school? He nodded. What class? Huh? I'm assuming school doesn't end at 1 o'clock. Oh, yeah. After lunch, so, trigonometry. You good at that stuff? What, trig? Yeah, I guess. I couldn't get past counting on my fingers. I wiggled my digits for a punchline. He didn't laugh. Your mom picked you up from math class to bring you to the doctor? Mm-hmm. What's wrong? With what? You said you were on the way to the doctor. Were you sick? Oh, yeah. No, just a checkup, I guess. You guess? There's only one in town, Brian said. One what? Doctor. Barth, St. Thomas Court. I know, I talked to him. In addition to Brian's mother, Donna, I'd spoken with her coworkers at We Copy, visited the accident site and service garage that was handling repairs, and I'd conversed with the doctor's office. The boy was the last item on my checklist. I knew D'Souza wasn't going to be happy losing $5,000. Blue Book value same as repairs, but that's why people have insurance. Then he told you I saw him? Brian exhaled, a clumsy sound caught between nervous laugh and hiccup. Why are you even here, man? I don't know what you need me for, if you already talked to Dr. Barth. I told you. Standard inquiry. Your mom hit a telephone pole? Brian nodded, jamming trembling hands in pockets. My bullshit meter began creeping toward red. Just a feeling I had. Something about the kid's agitation and skittishness. I now saw his lip looked a little puffy, swollen, as if it had smacked off a dash on impact. How fast had Mom been going? I glanced down at the report, pretending to read, peering up, looking him in the eye, long enough to make him uncomfortable, giving him time and enough rope. Brian's breathing sped up. I snapped the folder shut. What did I care if this kid was covering for his mom's lead foot? Not like I got paid extra for the personality profile. Judging by the dilapidated, sad state of the house, the Oliskis could use the money. Let them come out a few bucks ahead. Good for them. My day was done. Turning to go, I saw the photographs on the mantel and immediately recognized the wrestling poses. The staged yearbook kind, singlets and ear guards, grappling tigers ready to pounce. Before the bottom fell out of his life, my brother Chris had been a wrestling superstar for the Ashton Redcoats. Atop the fireplace, more action shots from actual meets closed around an unlit candle in the center, like a shrine. I stepped past Brian into the small room. Hey, you can't be in there. At the mantel, I picked up a gleaming gold trophy. Same heft as when my brother dominated the ranks, emotions ambushing me. I inspected one of the photographs. The wrestler in the picture had the same features and facial expressions as Brian. Not like a brother, I mean identical. Still slender, but tougher, more sinewy, ferocious, and without the glasses. I turned over my shoulder. With closed folder, I gestured behind them. Brian and the boys in the photos. You wrestle? He didn't strike me as the type. He shook his head. That's my brother Craig. I squinted to read the inscription on the wrestling trophy. Craig Oliski, first place, New Hampshire Regionals. I went down the line, studying the fierce gaze in the snapshots, cheering crowds, championship ceremonies. Remarkable, the resemblance. You look like twins, I said. We are. Were, I mean. You were twins? I didn't catch the implication. He's dead. I stopped touching Craig's photos, as if my fingerprints disgraced memories. I'm sorry, I said, both for the violation and the loss. Painkillers and alcohol, Brian offered without provocation. My dad moved out after that. Craig was his boy, you know. It's just me and my mom now. He tried to smile. Sometimes I think she got the short end. 10 minutes earlier, I'd manipulated my way inside the kid's house. Now I couldn't get out of there fast enough. Hard to compete with a superstar, he said. When he said that bit about superstars, something stirred inside, a realization. I'd never seen my brother wrestle. Chris had been 10 years older, putting me at 7 or so during his heyday, but still old enough to make a meet. I remember my mother trying to get me to go see him, and me putting up a fight, refusing, throwing tantrums. I never saw a match. The thing that made my brother special, what he had been best at in this entire world, the one thing he had to be proud of. Not a single meet. Years later, I'd talk about Chris's accomplishments as if they'd been my own, but at the time I'd been jealous, pure and simple. Chris was such the star, garnering so much attention. Even as a boy, I was envious of him. Funny, given how pathetic my brother ended up. I did it, Brian said. Huh? The accident, he said. I was driving the car. My mother was at work. I stared, dumbfounded. We were on 2 separate trains of thought, and circling back to the same conversation took me a moment. I'm not on the policy because it's too expensive to add me, and since my dad left, we don't have the money. I had that stupid doctor's appointment. My mom couldn't get off work. We're going to England. I'm supposed to go to England, with the marching band. I play bass drum. I'll never get to see Europe otherwise. I had to get all these shots for the trip. My mom worries a lot, and the deadline's coming up, and she has all these Christian CDs in her car, holy roller Jesus crap. Jesus? I wanted to hear the radio, man, Brian said, but nothing would come in. I had some MP3s in my backpack that my friend John gave me, but the backpack was crammed with textbooks and pens and earbuds. I couldn't find anything. I took my eye off the road for a second. Not even a second, I swear. I hit the telephone pole. I didn't know what to say. I called my mom. Her friend from work drove her over. When the cops showed up, my mom said she was driving. Am I gonna get in trouble? I shrugged. I don't care. Brian Oliski let go a terrific sigh, and a big smile crept over his face, like he'd heard a dirty joke in church and was fighting to suppress the giggles. Thanks, he said. For what? I don't like lying. It was bothering the hell out of me. My attention returned to the wrestling photographs on the mantel. What's harder, competing with a superstar, or carrying the burden of being the last man standing?